In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up Excel to automatically calculate commissions on a cumulative tier basis. To make sure we're on the same page, let's take 15 seconds to define what cumulative tier commissions are. So a cumulative tier commission is where commissioned employees are paid commission at a different rate depending on the cumulative sales that they've made over the course of a specified duration. Typically, that's going to be a quarter or a year. If that's still a little fuzzy, it'll make more sense when we dive into today's example, where sales personnel are paid commissions on a quarterly basis using a tiered structure that applies to the whole year. This is a great approach because it combines frequent commission payouts with long-term performance goals that help to eliminate any consequences that would otherwise come from seasonal ups and downs. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is the spreadsheet we're going to be getting set up today. You're going to want to start by defining your commission tiers. So that's going to be this table right here. It's very simple. These are just all entered values. So you're going to start out by your first column just being your tier number. That's going to be consecutive, 1, 2, 3, 4, however many tiers you want to use, or if you're working at a company that defines it, how many tiers they're using. The next thing is going to be the minimum and maximum range that constitute each tier. And so in this case, from the first $0 to $100,000 in sales that is accomplished is going to get paid at a 2% commission rate. The next 100,000, which is going to be from 100 to 200,000 in total or cumulative sales, is going to get paid out at 3% and so on. So the next one, tier 3 in this case, is a $300,000 block. So the next $300,000 of sales that take somebody from 200 cumulative 200,000 to 500,000 cumulative is going to get paid out at 4%. And you can see so on and so forth with the table. On this last row, essentially what this means is anything over $1 million gets paid at 6%. So I typed in a really massive number here just to make sure whatever sales number any employee hits, it's going to get captured in that final tier. So that's a good practice to do there. So once you have this table set up, now what you want to do is set up the calculator. And that is what this table up here is doing. And I'm going to walk you through exactly how to set up these formulas and everything in just a minute. So in this case, like I mentioned earlier, sales personnel are getting paid on a quarterly basis. Now you could change this for your purposes. It could be weekly, monthly, bi-weekly, whatever the case. Today we'll look at quarterly. So in this case, we're looking at this for a particular employee, let's just say Sally. So in the first quarter of the year, Sally had 40,323 sales, which means her cumulative sales are 40,323. We'll get into that formula in just a minute. And so her commission payout is automatically calculated right here, $806.46. The effective rate is 2%. Now notice if I change her period sales, let's just say 45,323. Now you're going to see that number update automatically. Then in quarter 2, she makes an additional 76,324. So this is just the period sales here. So she makes an additional 76. So her total cumulative sales so far for the year is 121,647. And so now she needs to get paid for quarter 2 based on this commission tier structure down here. Notice she's in the 121 cumulative, which means she has now crossed over the threshold and is now getting paid some tier 2, which is why her effective rate starts to bump up. It's no longer just 2% because now she's getting paid some at this 3%. And so it keeps bumping up. And then the same thing for the third quarter here. So now that you have an overview kind of what our end goal is and how this is set up or what the example is, let's dive into the details and how you can make this calculate automatically using Excel's built-in formulas. So once you have this table up here laid out with the period sales, cumulative sales, commission, and effective rate, what we want to do is first write this formula for cumulative sales. This is the most simple formula. We're just going to do equals sum, open parentheses, and they're going to click the cell next to it, so the period sales, and then just do a colon. And notice as soon as you type in colon, it's going to automatically put in the second B3 there for you, which is exactly what you want. You can close those parentheses, and then just make sure you put a $sign in front of the 3. That's just going to freeze that so that as we drag that formula down, everything will work properly. So hit enter, and now the cumulative sales, of course, for the first quarter is kind of boring, just the period sales. But if we take this, hover over the corner until you get the crosshairs like that, and click, left click and drag it down, now you end up with the cumulative sales going all the way down. So you can see if I hit F2 or click in the formula bar, it shows you that we're capturing the cumulative sales there. So you can see how that formula works all the way down. And what I like to do, I don't like to have values down here. So the cumulative sales, quarter 4 hasn't happened yet. There's no value typed in there. So I prefer that this doesn't display anything. So you don't have to do this, but I like to add in an if statement up front. If, open your parentheses, click this B3 cell, equals quote, quote, which is just in Excel's terminology is blank, means the cell is blank. So if that is blank, then we want to display blank. Otherwise, we want to do the sum. So you can pause the video for a second if you need to retype that formula in your own screen. But once that is there, now if we take that and drag it down, you're going to see that last one will stay blank. And the same thing, if Q3 hadn't happened yet, it would be blank. And that's just going to keep the spreadsheet neater. So that's how you can get your cumulative sales column set up. So the next thing we need to do is add in the formulas that are going to automatically calculate the commissions to be paid out. That'll automatically populate this commissions column. But in order to do that, the best way, the way that's going to be the easiest to understand and easiest to implement on your end is going to be to use something called helper columns. And I'll show you exactly how to get these set up. When I say helper column, all that is it's just using the columns out to the right that will hide at the end. There's nothing special about the columns. It's just that you don't plan to have them shown once you're done. So you're going to need to set up two tables out here to the right. The first one is going to be the earnings per tier. The second one is the commission per tier. I'll explain all the formulas that make that work in just a moment. But the first thing to realize is that you need a column for every tier in your commission system. So since we have 5 tiers in the commission system today in our example, we have 5 columns in both of these tables. So if you only had 3 tiers, it'd be a little simpler. You'd only need 3 columns in each of these tables. Okay, so each of these columns then represents a tier. And what this is telling me in the earnings per tier table right here, what this is telling me is for each quarter, how many earnings fell into that particular range for each tier. So for example, in Sally's Q1 through Q3 we'll look at in our example today, she made $45,323 in her first quarter. So that full amount falls within the first tier. And so that's going to automatically come in here. Again, I'll go over that formula here in just a moment, but I'm just explaining what it's doing first, what the outcome is. So that's all going to go here. And how much money did she make in the second tier, in the $100,000 to $200,000 range? Well, 0, right? Because she didn't have any sales, any cumulative sales that went into that range. So these are all going to return 0. But if we look at Q2, now we'll see that changing a little bit. So for Q2, looking at her cumulative earnings, and maybe I should update this to make it clear, cumulative earnings per tier. Looking at her cumulative earnings, she had, since her cumulative amount now is 121, of course she maxed out the first tier. So she had 100,000 in that tier. And then in the second tier, she has 21,000 because she went $21,647 beyond the maximum there. And so that automatically gets returned there with zeros in tiers 3 through 4 or 3 through 5. And so you get the idea how that's going to build out over time. So again, if she, in quarter 4, let's just say she only did 20,000. Now you see she's still only in these first 3 tiers because she wasn't able to quite break into that $500,000 tier, which would put her in the 4th tier. But on the other hand, if she had a really, really good season, around Christmas, maybe she's in retail. So she had an amazing 4th quarter. Now you can see that she has made it into the 4th tier. Her total is 710,000, which falls in this range. And so now she's got some money showing up there. So that's what this table is going to do. It's going to automatically show how much cumulative earnings fell into each tier for every quarter. Now this next one over here is just going to take that, and this table will be very simple. This table is the most complicated thing we'll do today. After that, it'll be really easy. So we'll get that out of the way in just a minute. The commission per tier is then just going to calculate, hey, based on how much cumulative earnings fell in each tier, how much commission should be paid out for each tier. Okay, so let's start with the cumulative earnings per tier. So again, this first part right here, the equals if, blah, blah, blah. All that is just so that if nothing's been entered in yet, it'll stay blank. So let me delete all of these and you see everything's blank. It only shows something if once sales data gets entered in for each quarter. In this case, this is really the meat of the formula then, right there, what I have highlighted. So what it's doing is it's saying if the cumulative sales amount is greater than the maximum for the tier that you're in, then you need to display that tier because they've maxed it out. So of course they've used 100,000. So let's just say her initial period or quarter 1 sales was 150,000. Well, then that should return 100,000 because she's maxed out the first tier. And then she also has an additional 50,000 that's fallen into that second tier. And so you can see that formula working automatically and correctly. So that's all for the first tier. It's pretty simple. It's just if C3, so if this cumulative sales value is greater than the maximum tier, then display that maximum tier. And if it isn't, then you just display the cumulative sales amount. So again, if she only had 75,000 here, then it should just display the 75,000 since she's hasn't maxed out tier 1. And so once you get that formula written, it's pretty easy to copy that down for each quarter because it's doing the exact same thing. The only thing that's changing is now you need to point it to quarter 2 cumulative, and then quarter 3 cumulative, quarter 4 cumulative. So you can see that the only thing changing in the formula is the row that it's pointing to in column C, and everything else stays the same. So that one's pretty easy. Now let's move on to the second tier where things will get a little bit more complicated. So in this case, we're using very similar logic, the same formula in Excel, the if formula, but we're nesting it a little bit more. If you need help writing nested if formulas, there's some great videos on YouTube. You can Google or type into the YouTube search nested if formulas, but you don't actually have to master those in order to use what I'm showing you today. You can just work through this example and then update it for your use case. So let's look at the second tier here. So again, this first if C3 equals blank, then display blank is just so that it'll be blank if nothing's been entered in. The real meat of the formula is through here. So let's look at what that's doing. So this is saying, hey, if C3, if the cumulative sales are greater than the second tier threshold, meaning they've moved into the second tier threshold, then we need to do something. So if it meets that criteria, because if it hasn't met that, then it's just going to be the 0 over here. But if it has, the first if statement, if the cumulative sales are greater than the minimum threshold for tier 2, then here's what we need to do. We need to open up another if statement. So this is the test. The condition that follows that is a value of true, which is this whole thing. So if that's true, let's do another if statement. Let's see if C3 is greater, the cumulative sales is greater than the max threshold for the tier that we're in, tier 2. That should look very familiar. That's exactly what we did in the previous tier. If the cumulative sales are greater than the maximum threshold value for that tier that we're in, tier 2, then what we need to do is use that max threshold tier 2 value, but we've got to subtract from it the tier 1 value, because otherwise we're going to be doubling up. We're going to be counting the tier 1 value again in tier 2, and we don't want to do that. And so we have to subtract that out. So that's why this is saying C11 minus C10. Really quickly, you see these dollar signs in here. I add those dollar signs just so I can copy formulas easily. If you're not familiar with those, then you can leave those off. You don't have to have them in there like I have them. So you could leave out the dollar signs if you're trying to recreate this on your own. Okay, so if it's greater than that, if the cumulative sales exceed the max threshold, then do the max threshold minus the previous max threshold of 100,000. Otherwise, we need to do the, so if that's not the case, if they haven't maxed out the second threshold, then you need to do their cumulative sales minus the previous threshold amount. That's going to tell you how far into that second threshold they made it. So you can literally just copy this formula. If you have a very similar setup, you can just copy this formula into your own screen or use it from the example download file. See the description for a link to that. But otherwise, hopefully the logic is making sense where you could rewrite this for your own use case. And so that's not going to change at all as we move down column or tier 2. So once that formula is written, if you do the dollar signs the way I wrote it, then you can copy it down and it'll work just fine. You can also click it and drag it like that. Okay, so now we have our tier 2 written. And the good news is that from there, it's actually pretty easy to finish filling out this table, which again is the most complicated thing we have to do today. So for example, I'm going to hit the F2 key to explode the cell so you can see the formula. And I just want you to watch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of walk across here, the different tiers, and you can watch and see how these references change, or even keep an eye on the formula. And you'll notice it's not much different. Really, all that's changing is we're just scooting down the tier table. So, and once we get in tier 3, instead of it pointing to tier 1 and 2, it's now pointing to tier 2 and tier 3. When we get into 4, it's pointing to tier 3 and tier 4, and then 5 is going to point to 4 and 3. So you can see the formulas stay roughly the same. Really, the only difference is that we are moving down that tier table as we move horizontally across. What about moving down vertically? Well, I already showed you that. So once you get this built across this way, again, especially if you are able to use those dollar signs the way that I have them in there, then you can actually take that and copy the whole thing down and everything will update correctly. So I'm just doing Control-C, Control-V on the keyboard, or you can also do the cursor and drag it down like that. Okay, so now we have the cumulative earnings per tier filled out, what you want to do is make sure you type in some example data over here and see that this is making sense over here, that it's lining up. And of course, in this case, it is. So now we're going to set up the commission per tier table out here on the right. And this one is extremely easy. So the beginning of this first formula, so we're going to look in the first quarter, first commission tier right here. It's my cell K3. So in here, we start out with the familiar formula, if C3 equals blank, then display blank. Otherwise, and then here's the meat of our formula today. So again, if you don't care about the blanks and keeping it looking neat and nice, then technically this is all you need right there. So all we're doing is we are taking and we are multiplying the cumulative earnings times the commission rate. So the cumulative earnings, since we're in tier 1, I'm going to get the cumulative earnings from tier 1 that's already been calculated for us over here and multiply it by the corresponding commission rate from our commission tier table. So that would just be, if I were writing it from scratch, equals, and get the 75,000, use an asterisk, which is your times symbol or multiplication symbol, times the corresponding commission rate. So there we go. Then on the next line down, well, actually, once you get that formula written, this is the really nice thing about this, is what you can do is put a $sign in front of the D, or in front of the column, I should say, for your commission rate down here. And once that's done, you can actually copy that one formula and paste it all the way across. And you see all these values coming up. That's because I don't have the equals if blank in there to keep everything looking neat. But there's really just one formula that we need, and that is the multiplying the cumulative commission from this previous table times the commission rate that it corresponds with. So I'll move over here to like a third tier in the commission in the second quarter, and you see it's multiplying the corresponding number over here with the number from the commission tier table. Okay, so once those two helper tables are set up, we are almost done. Now what we need to do is write the formula that's going to automatically fill out what we've really been getting after the whole time, which is the commission payout for the employee for each quarter. So the initial formula for the first quarter is extremely simple. So it's just a sum formula. So all we need to do, we've already calculated, remember over here, we've already calculated the commissions that should correspond to each tier. So all we have to do over here is do a sum formula. So we're going to sum up all of the commissions that would have been earned for the first quarter across all 5 tiers, or however many tiers you have. So again, that's just an equals sum, open parentheses, and select that range to sum, close your parentheses, and hit enter. So that was a really easy one. The next one down's a little bit more complicated, but still pretty easy. So again, we're starting out with the if B4 equals blank, display blank, just to keep things clean. Otherwise, we're going to get into the meat of the formula right here. So all we're doing in this case is we're taking the sum of the current quarter over here in our far right table, just like we did on the row above. But now we need to subtract out the commissions we've already accounted for. Otherwise, you'll end up doubling up as you go. So we want to take out the commissions that were already paid so you don't get paid for it again in the next quarter. So in this case, we're doing the sum of this range minus the value above. And you notice I did a sum formula here. That was just so I could copy the formula down. I'm going to write this from scratch just so you can see it played out. So I could do the sum of these values over here in quarter 2, and then just subtract out, do a minus symbol, subtract out the prior, what was paid in quarter 1, and hit enter, and I'll get the same answer, and that would be correct. And then come down here and do the same thing, but in this case, you would need to subtract out both of the previous quarters, like that, and so on. But I prefer to just write one formula and copy it down, which is why I would do the equals if. This is blank, display blank. Otherwise, what we want to do is sum all the values over here and subtract from those the sum of all values above. So I'm going to do minus sum, open my parentheses, click the cell above. Remember, when I do the colon, it's going to automatically repeat that D3. I can close that. And I need to put a $sign in front of that first 3 so that it will then expand, keep that starting point of the range. And then once that is done, I can now copy it the rest of the way down. So now that we've done that, we have pretty much everything done. But in case you want to be able to see what your effective commission rate is, here is the formula to do that as well. So to that, all we're doing is we are getting the sum of the total sum of commissions paid so far divided by the cumulative sales so far. So in this case, we're summing up D3 through D3, which is just that value. Let's look at the next one where it'll be a little clearer for quarter 2. Now what we're doing is we're summing up all the commission paid so far, so everything from quarter 1 and quarter 2, and dividing it from the total sales so far, and so on and so forth. So quarter 3 would sum up quarters 1 through 3 and divide it by the cumulative sales at the end of quarter 3. And that will give you your effective rate. Then once you do that, if you want to hide these columns over here, you can just put your mouse over the columns until it turns into that arrow. Left click and drag to select all of those, then right click and hide. And now you have a neater looking table with all of those things being calculated. Now, as you can see, this is not the easiest to set up, but hopefully watching this video will help you to be able to tailor it to your needs. In the event you do end up getting stuck, or maybe you have a system that this doesn't quite capture, something that's more complicated, or you need to add features, you can also reach out to our team. We build custom commission solutions for clients all the time. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about how we can get you set up with something that is going to streamline your commissions so that you can give up the headache of trying to manually calculate these, or even manually building a spreadsheet yourself, again, if you're getting stuck with that. So see the link in the description, information in the description of this video below. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. And we also have a commission playlist that you can check out as well that should be showing up on the screen. So feel free to check that out for more tips on how to streamline your commission calculations. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.